Welcome back to the studio. In this video, we are going to just do a few more of the details on our snowman, a little bit more work with the eyes of both the cardinal and the snowman, and the little pine detail that is going to be really fun to paint. So grab something warm to drink. I have some Monster Mash hot tea from Adagio Teas, and let's have fun and paint. So I think for these details, we'll start off doing the cardinal's feet here. Let's open up our palette. I've had this overnight stored in the Ziploc. If you open yours up and everything is dried, the great thing about using these little styrofoam plates is that you can just throw it away and start over. And that's also a great reason to just not put out too much paint in your piles. So with the cardinal's feet, I love to study whatever I'm painting, and from many years of painting cardinals, I know that their feet are kind of a purpley gray pink color. It's really an interesting color. For our piece here, we don't have to be really particular. His feet are so small, but any of those little studies that you can do to learn about what you're painting are kind of fun, and it stays in your artist memory bank for the next time that you paint. So to mix this, I'm going to start with a little touch of quinacridone magenta. I'm going to add in just the tiniest touch of the phthalo, and it is so strong. So I'm just going to keep touching my brush to the side over here to get some of that off. And I think I'll touch into this burnt sienna that's left. That will gray it a little bit more. Let's grab a tiny bit of the titanium white to see where we are. A little bit more burnt sienna. We're just looking for sort of a brown red. And then I want to make sure I don't have too much paint on this tiny brush, and just touch in simply these tiny little legs. Because the art base has the shape on them, we don't have to do a lot here. Those lines that were left by the laser are going to do a lot of the work. If you wanted to, you could add a little highlight, but again, this is just, it's so tiny that it really doesn't need a lot of detail here. So I just added a little bit more titanium white. I'll wipe out my brush and touch back into that to take a little bit out. Very easy. So let's go ahead and mix a green. I'm going to use a little bit of a larger brush just for the mixing. Go ahead and get my brush wet. And let's go ahead and do the phthalo blue. I'll move some of that over here and bring in some of the Hansa Yellow Opaque. I'm just stepping off to the side. That helps me to manage how much of that blue gets in there. You can see that it just takes just the tiniest little bit. Since I have this green mixed, I know I'm going to want a few different variations of this color. So I'm going to grab just a little bit of quinacridone magenta to make a little bit of a darker green. And then I think I'll add a little bit of titanium white over on this side to make a lighter green. You could see there that there was a little bit of red in my brush still. It's perfectly okay. All of those different colors are wonderful. And it's another reason why using the professional grade paints is great, because a little bit of color left in your brush won't completely ruin the mix usually. So I'll dip down into the airbrush medium, clean out my brush a little bit. You can see there it has quite a bit of that pink red still left in it. You could completely rinse out your brush in your water dish if you need to. And I'm going to thin out the more true green that we first mixed and start to do some of these details on his little pine hat. So I'm just going to touch sort of at the base and just flick out. So it's kind of a touch down and lift motion. Grab a little more paint. Remember, this is a little bit thinned out. Anytime we're doing thin lines like this, we want to thin our paint a little bit. The important thing to remember about thinning your paint is that it will make your paint a little bit more transparent, which is wonderful for details like this because that lets us come back in and add some different colors. So that's the main green. Let's go ahead and pick up some of that darker green. I might make it just a little bit darker, just a little bit more quinacridone magenta. And same thing, we're just going to touch down and lift and put just some different variations of green out here. I don't know if it's the weather. I don't think it's a full moon, but Lucy, our new kitty, has been a menace today. So I think that the last thing I'll do, just very, very simply, is come in and do just a little lighter variation. I want it to be a little bit more blue. I think the blue green in pine can look really interesting. So I just took that same mixture, added a tiny bit more of the phthalo blue, a little bit more of the titanium white, and then I'll grab a little bit of the airbrush medium to thin it some and come back in and just add a little bit of that. If you're working on yours and you feel like this lighter version took over some of the other greens, do another layer. Go back to your green and come back and just put a few spots of that in. Yeah, I think that that looks pretty good. I think that the only thing I want to add is to come back in and reinforce this base a little bit. Just darken where it first starts out of his hat here. I'm just kind of filling it in a little bit more at the base there to darken it. Yeah, he's cute. Let's go ahead and work on the eyes. I mentioned yesterday that I have something that I always love to do in eyes, and that is I always love to add a little bit of blue. I think that blue kind of can bring the eyes to life a little bit, sort of a reflection of the sky. So I've mixed just a little bit of titanium white, a tiny bit of the phthalo blue, and I'm just going to touch along the back right here. It's a little bit bigger than I want it to be. That's completely fine. In fact, I like it to be a little bit bigger to start out because then I can come back in with a little bit of the black on my brush and just touch right back into that to settle that in. So I really can only see just a tiny little hint of that blue there. Now I'll touch into some titanium white. I'm almost out here. And on the opposite side, more to the right edge, I'll do a little catch light, just a little touch. And that's it. His eyes are done, and that just those couple little touches really brought his eyes to life. Let's see if we can do a little bit with the cardinal. Again, this is very tiny. You could get like a toothpick, or if you have like a stylus tool, um, you could use that for this tiny part. If you have small round brushes, those are great too. But for this series, I'm going to be keeping everything very simple. So I'm just going to use the smallest brush that I have here. I'm going to dip into a little bit of the airbrush medium and try to, this poor little brush has been used quite a bit, and it's a little bit frayed at the end. So I'm going to try to make it behave a little bit. I'm just going to touch in with the white. Wipe my brush out a little bit. For this eye, because it is so tiny, I'm not going to add any of the blue. I'm just going to go ahead and dip in, get a little bit of the black on my brush, and I'm going to tap this bottom corner. A little bit more black, tap it again. And I'll show you at the end of this class. I'll zoom in. I have the camera set so that it doesn't autofocus. So I think that the last thing that I want to do for this part of our video, I'm just looking to make sure that I'm not missing anything. I think the last thing I want to do is something that's completely optional, but I'm going to add some evergreens to the bottom edge just to fill in this space. And I want these evergreens to be very transparent, very atmospheric. In art, when we say something is atmospheric, we mean that it contains more of the sky color. So remember, our sky color was the phthalo blue, burnt sienna, titanium white. We're almost out of burnt sienna. I might add just a tiny touch more over here. I feel a sneeze coming. And if you're doing something like this, please understand this. Your piece is beautiful without this, but you know, some of these little details can be fun to do, and you know, try it. I think you'll be surprised at how well you can paint something that's not engraved on your piece with just a few little tips. So the first tip that I'm going to give you, if I can find mine, is to pull out a sketchbook. This is a well-loved sketchbook. If you don't have a sketchbook, just pull out any paper and do a little practice. My sketchbook is full of lots of little loose drawings. I'm going to do a painting, a watercolor painting on that page. Here's some bluebird sketches that I did. But if you can just practice just a little bit on some blank paper, you'll feel a little bit more at ease, a little bit more confident when you go to your piece. So I'm just getting this brush wet. This brush that I have in my hand is a size 4. And I'm going to come down to this green that we just mixed. This green, it's got a little bit of extra blue. Just anything in there. I think I'll just touch into a little bit of red. I just want, even that was too much red. I just want to mute it down a little bit. Touching your brush on the side of your palette can really, really help. I want this to be quite light, so I'm going to mix in some titanium white. So there, I hope you can see we have just a nice little light green color. I'm going to thin it out so it stays very transparent. The nice thing about starting almost too transparent is that we can come back in once we have the main base added and add more details. So when I'm doing a evergreen tree, I think about at the top starting very vertical, so just kind of tapping in a basic shape. Then I'm going to start to twist my brush right and left as I work one side of the tree and the other. So just twisting, doing kind of both sides at the same time. As you come down the tree, we want to start letting these be more horizontal. So up at the top, they were more a V shape, angled up. In the middle of the tree, they're a little bit more horizontal. And in the middle of the tree, I can press down a bit more on the brush, use more of the brush. Toward the bottom of the tree, now I'm going to use lots of pressure and let these branches angle down. So you can see that really, really easy. You can build a shape of an evergreen without too much work. Once you get it on your piece, if you like it, you can always come back in and add a few more of the darker green details if you want to. On this piece, I do want to keep it fairly soft. I'm going to try not to close my sketchbook so that it doesn't get the other page with wet paint. So let me see what I want to do here. I think that I'm going to do a little tree here. I've kind of sketched this out in Procreate so I could get a feel for what it will be like. I'm going to really thin down the paint even more than I had it in the sketchbook because I want it to be very transparent. And this way I can really sneak up on it without, being too locked in. So I think that my first tree will be about right here. I don't want it to be even with his nose. So I'm going to start about right here, I think. And I'm just going to lightly tap in just a basic shape so that I kind of know where I'm going, a little bit of a road map. And then I think I'm going to do a little tree right here. Again, V'ing up at the top so that these top branches are angled up, and then using more of the brush as I get down to the bottom, really pressing in that shape. And I know that's very, very light, but if you start very light like that, you'll have much more control over where these trees are going. I think I'm going to do just one more, maybe a taller one over here. Again, I don't want it to be the same height as his crest there. I don't want things to line up like that. So let's make this one pretty big out here. Turning my brush, angling up at the top, trying to just let it be loose. I don't want to manage this too much. I want it to be loose and free, very much like an evergreen tree will. So underneath down here, I'll just start to kind of tap in. You might want to grab a little bit of a bigger brush. Let's see what I have here. I'll grab the 6. For these bigger, this bigger area down here. So once you lay that paint in, you can dip back into your airbrush medium, get most of the paint out of your brush, and then come back in and just tap to soften all of that in. I'm going to come back and fill in a little bit of this area that didn't get painted by the cardinal. Yeah, I really like how that looks. The thing with the round that we really have to be careful of is that the tree doesn't bend with the round. So I'm going to come back and just straighten it a little bit. Yeah, I think that looks better. And those are the kinds of changes that we can make because we've started out so light. We've started out with our paint so thinned down. This tree, we can let it overlap. I'm just going to pick up a little bit of a variation of colors. Maybe even, well, I'll start with this darker green first. Anytime that you mix a new paint or you pick up a new paint, take your first few strokes at just assessing if you like it. If it's too dark, then make some changes. I think I'm going to change this tree in the middle to be just a little bit more of a, have a little bit more of a blue cast. That will also help it sort of go back into the background just a little bit. So just picking up a little bit of that phthalo blue that was right here by the greens, adding some titanium white, and then thinning it so it's very transparent again. And I'm going to blot out my brush and come back into this tree and just add in a little bit of that blue. That more blue tint to it. Let's see. This is still pretty wet with the airbrush medium, so I want to let that dry a little bit. I think I'll come back in and just add a little bit of dark to this big one on the side over here. You can see how that filbert brush makes a really interesting little upside down U shape. So just tapping away until I get it where I like it. The more you tap in the areas where you just put paint, the more that you can blend that out just a little bit. I want to darken it a little bit under this cardinal right here. And then darken a little bit along this edge down here. And I do really want to darken this, but I want to let this part dry a little bit. So it's really, really cute. The last thing that I'll do to mine, and you can spend your time going back and forth on yours. You may have to let it dry just a little bit. I want to come back in with a little bit more of a, some of that blue coming in. That'll just help soften it a little bit. I have a little bit too much paint in my brush. So not really snow, but sort of just a highlight on the tree. Just have fun with it. It really is so fun. It really makes a big statement on the piece, kind of changes it. The thing to do here at this point would be take it to your kitchen, put it up on the counter, spend a little bit of time looking at it. Um, I've talked about this a lot on my YouTube channel, just how much of a difference it can make to spend a little bit of time with your piece. Um, I usually fall in love with my piece, not in my studio, but actually when I take it up and spend some time with it. So sometimes when I'm spending a little bit of time with it, I can see things that I didn't see in the studio. I can see things that I want to make changes to. It's a little bit blown out with the lights there, but he really is super fun and really cute. I'm going to end this video here. I will see you in the final part for our snowman piece as we come back in and set in some of the highlights on the snowman himself and get him all perfect. So the link to part 4 is in this video description. Just click that link and I will meet you there.